Black CEO poses as janitor to catch racist staff. Their reactions will shock you. The mop handle creaked in Elijah Monroe's hand as he swiped it across the marble floors of the 15th floor executive lobby. It had only been his second day working under the identity of Eli, a new janitor hired through a third-party cleaning vendor, but already he'd seen more than enough. The suit and tie he used to wear had been replaced by a navy uniform, one size too big, with a stitched name tag that read E. Thomas. No one gave him a second glance. This was exactly how he wanted it. Just weeks before, Elijah had been in his penthouse office in Manhattan, poring over a troubling internal audit of Monroe Enterprises, his company. A whisper campaign had reached his ears from low-level employees who reported instances of bullying, racial profiling, and discriminatory policies within the HR and sales divisions. The reports were subtle, veiled in bureaucratic language, but the pattern was clear. Something had gone deeply wrong. So Elijah, now 58 years old and tired of delegating, made a decision. He shaved his goatee, wore contact lenses instead of his signature glasses, and traded his Bentley for an old Ford Fusion. His assistant Charles had helped arrange a contract with a cleaning services firm that had no idea who he really was. And just like that, the founder and CEO of Monroe Enterprises became Eli the janitor. Now he pushed a mop cart into the employee break room, where the smell of reheated noodles clashed with perfume and burnt coffee. The room fell into an awkward silence as he entered. A blonde woman in a cherry-red dress glanced up from her phone and wrinkled her nose. "Do you mind?" she snapped. "You're dripping water near the food station." "My bad," Elijah replied calmly, keeping his eyes low. She waved her hand dismissively, then turned to the others. "This building gets more ghetto every year." No one laughed. No one objected either. Her name tag read Chelsea R. She was the executive receptionist, the gatekeeper for the top floor. Elijah made a mental note and turned back to his mop. He heard a few snickers as he left the room. One voice in particular stood out, male, smug, southern accent. "You'd think they'd at least hire janitors who speak English properly," the voice said. That was Logan Price, head of sales. White, early 40s, Yale ring still polished like it was fresh off the rack. Elijah had studied his file more than once. Fast-talking, charming with clients, yet flagged repeatedly in anonymous complaints. Later that day, Elijah found himself in the underground parking garage, spraying off oil stains on the concrete floor. A black SUV pulled into the executive spot. Logan Price stepped out in a tailored suit, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders at someone on the other end. When he hung up, Logan spotted Elijah scrubbing the floor and scoffed. "Hey, mop man," he said, pointing. "You missed a spot under my tire." "You know, for what we pay your kind, you'd think you'd do it right the first time." Elijah stood. "Yes, sir. I'll get right on it." Logan smirked and walked off. Elijah watched him disappear into the elevator, his jaw tight. That moment crystallized everything. This wasn't about efficiency or performance. It was about power and who they thought deserved it. The irony, of course, was thick. Elijah Monroe, worth $2.7 billion, philanthropist, keynote speaker at Harvard, owner of 4 skyscrapers in Manhattan, was being talked down to like he was nothing. And no one knew a thing. Back in the janitor's closet that evening, Elijah opened a small notebook and began to write. Chelsea R. Racist undertones, public embarrassment tactics. Logan Price. Habitual offender. Possible abuse of power. A knock at the door startled him. It was Jamal, an older black man with tired eyes and a crooked smile. "You good, man?" Jamal asked. "Saw the way that prick talked to you earlier." Elijah nodded. "I'm good. You've worked here long?" 17 years. Been through 5 CEOs, dozens of managers. "But none of them really saw us," We're invisible, man. Hell, sometimes I think that's the job description. You ever think about leaving? Jamal laughed. Every damn day, but my son's in college, I keep my head down. You should too. Elijah reached over and clasped his shoulder. Or maybe it's time someone stood up. Jamal gave him a long look. Don't go making trouble for yourself, Eli. This place chews up people like us. But Elijah wasn't planning to be chewed up. He was planning to burn the rot to the ground. That night, alone in his one-bedroom rental apartment, Elijah stared out the window overlooking the city skyline. The very tower he built stood tall among the lights. It used to make him proud. Now, it made him restless. He poured a glass of water, sat at the table, and played a recording on his phone. It was Logan, again, belittling the interns over coffee orders. He hit save. Then opened his laptop and drafted a file labeled Evidence Phase 1. The next morning would be different. He wouldn't just be a janitor anymore. He would be a shadow in their midst. Waiting, watching, and soon judging. The coffee machine on the third floor sputtered and hissed as Elijah refilled the supply cabinet nearby. It was barely 8 a.m., and already the corridor was buzzing with footsteps, forced laughter, and the clacking of high heels on polished tile. Most of them ignored the janitor crouched by the cabinet. One woman even stepped over his arm without saying a word. That suited Elijah just fine. He had no intention of being noticed, only of noticing. The day before, he had finished cataloging 24 incidents. Snide comments, eye rolls, condescension, and in one case, outright refusal to share an elevator with him. Most came from junior managers or HR staff, but today he was watching someone else, Valerie Hawkins, the senior director of operations. She was articulate, confident, and as Elijah had learned from his hidden earpiece and back-channel reports from Charles, one of the biggest gatekeepers of company culture. While she publicly preached inclusivity, internally she had a reputation for micromanaging and shutting down minority employees who tried to speak up. At 9:45 a.m. Sharp. Valerie strutted into the glass conference room, latte in hand. Through the clear walls, Elijah could see her begin her morning briefing with Logan Price and a few junior execs. He pretended to mop just outside as the conversation began to drift. They're trying to push this diversity initiative again, Valerie sighed. You know how much admin time it takes to babysit people who don't even have the qualifications to be here? Logan laughed. Yeah, well, it's all optics now. As long as we have enough representation on the website, nobody looks too deep. Elijah's hands clenched around the mop. There it was, the exact rot he came to expose. Inside the room, another voice chimed in. Honestly, said a junior exec named Derek, that new girl in marketing, Kennedy, she only got hired because of the DEI pressure, right? Valerie rolled her eyes. Please. She's from Howard. That tells you enough. Laughter followed. Elijah stepped back, face expressionless. Kennedy Harris was one of the rising stars in the company, a sharp thinker, top of her class, and the only black woman on the marketing team. Hearing this kind of talk from leadership wasn't just disheartening, it was dangerous. Later that afternoon, Elijah found Kennedy sitting alone at a lunch table in the atrium, scrolling through her phone. He approached slowly, still in his janitor uniform. Mind if I clear these? He asked, pointing at the empty trays. She smiled politely and nodded. Sure, thank you. He lingered a second longer. You doing okay? Her eyes flicked up. She studied him for a moment. Yeah, I mean, work's been fine. Just learning the ropes. You ever feel like the ropes are tied a little tighter around your neck than everyone else's? Elijah asked. Her smile faltered. You're not just a janitor, are you? Elijah blinked. What makes you say that? You listen. You see people. That's rare here. He chuckled softly. Let's just say I've been around a long time. She nodded, and after a pause, her voice lowered. They don't think I belong here. I hear the way they talk when they think I'm not around. Valerie undermines everything I do, but frames it like she's mentoring me. I believe you, Elijah said simply. That was all it took. Kennedy's walls cracked just a little. She leaned forward, whispering, I've been documenting everything. Emails, tone, how she assigns projects. But I can't go to HR. Valerie and the head of HR are best friends. If I say something, I'll be blacklisted. Elijah's heart pounded. This was bigger than he thought. Keep documenting, he said. But don't go it alone. You're not as alone here as you think. That night, Elijah met with Charles in a quiet cafe on the Lower East Side. She's got evidence, Elijah said. Real proof. Charles stirred his coffee. And you want to use it? I want her to use it, but not until I've gathered enough to expose the whole pattern. Valerie, Logan, HR, all of it. You sure you want to go that far? Public scandal could tank morale. Stock prices could take a hit. Elijah leaned forward. You ever hear the saying, sunlight is the best disinfectant? Let it burn. We'll rebuild with people who know better. Charles exhaled. Then we'd better make sure the fire is big enough. Back at the office the next day, Elijah made his way into the executive floor with a fresh mop bucket and a hidden mic in his pocket. He passed by the hallway just as Valerie was berating Kennedy again, this time in front of others. I expect more professionalism. If you can't handle constructive feedback, maybe this isn't the right environment for you. Kennedy stood still, humiliated, jaw tight. No one said a word. But someone heard it, someone recorded it, and soon someone would answer for it. The morning after Kennedy's public scolding, a strange silence blanketed the 12th floor. It wasn't the usual kind of quiet from overworked teams or deadline stress. It was the kind that carried tension, the kind that prickled your skin the second you stepped off the elevator. Elijah could feel it, even through the scratchy collar of his janitor uniform. He was mopping the hallway near the glass conference rooms when he spotted Kennedy exiting Valerie's office, shoulders stiff, lips pressed in a thin line. Elijah kept his head down, moving his mop in slow arcs, but their eyes met briefly. Just a flicker. But enough. In that look, he saw it. Shame buried under frustration, and frustration buried under fire. Minutes later, he made his way down to the basement maintenance closet, where he pulled out his phone and slipped on a small earpiece. Charles, he said quietly, I think it's time we push the next phase. Charles's voice crackled through. You ready to make it public? Not yet, but we need more than whispers. We need to rattle the walls. Elijah clicked off the call and opened his laptop. Hidden in a locked compartment behind the janitorial supply rack was a small monitor synced to feeds from security cameras across 3 key floors, installed with the full knowledge of legal, but only accessible to a handful of senior officers. He watched Kennedy return to her desk. Not 10 seconds later, Logan walked over with his trademark smirk. No hard feelings, right? Logan said, leaning on her cubicle wall. Val just has high standards. Kennedy didn't look up. She humiliated me in front of the entire team. Logan chuckled. You're in the big leagues now. If you want a pat on the back, maybe try HR. Her eyes finally met his, cold and unwavering. I'm not going to HR. I'm going to keep doing the job I was hired to do, better than the rest of you. His grin vanished. Careful. Arrogance isn't a good look, especially for someone in your position. Elijah froze. He rewound the tape, played it again, especially for someone in your position. That wasn't just condescension. It was coded, targeted. Elijah pushed back from the screen, heart pounding. This wasn't just workplace hostility. This was systemic, deliberate. That evening, he slipped into the break room during cleaning rounds and approached Ava, the night shift receptionist. She had been there longer than most people on the executive team and had a reputation for hearing everything without ever raising her voice. "You've been quiet lately," he said softly, spraying down the coffee counter. Ava glanced up from her crossword. "Quiet, Safa." He looked at her. "Safa from what?" A beat passed. Then she set her pen down. "You really want to know?" she asked. Elijah nodded. There was a young guy, Marcus, smart, always stayed late, polite to everyone. He tried to call out Logan for mismanaging the client files on a big contract. That was last year. What happened to him? He was gone within a month. They said he violated IT policy but never gave details. Just like that. Poof. And no one said anything? Ava looked down. Some of us have mortgages, kids. Healthcare. You learn when to keep your head down. Elijah's jaw tightened. But sometimes keeping your head down makes it easier for people to walk all over you. Ava studied him. You talk like someone who's seen this before. He smiled faintly. You could say that. Back upstairs, a new memo had just hit inboxes. A mandatory employee morale workshop scheduled for Friday. Valerie's doing. A PR stunt meant to make the executive floor look inclusive to outsiders visiting next week. Elijah, posing as part of the cleaning crew, was tasked with setting up the chairs for the workshop in the East Wing conference room. As he worked, he overheard Valerie and Derek talking behind the divider curtain. We'll make Kennedy speak on diversity, Valerie was saying. It'll look great for the quarterly report. Do you think she'll agree? She doesn't have to. I'll word it as an opportunity. If she says no, that's just more evidence she's not a team player. Elijah gritted his teeth. It was a trap. Frame her as the problem either way. That night, he called Kennedy using a secure app only he and Charles had access to. They want to use you, Elijah warned her. Put you on display. I figured, she replied, voice steady. But what do I do? If I say no, they'll use it against me. If I say yes, I become their token. Do neither, Elijah said. Instead, you'll give a speech, but not the one they expect. A pause. You're asking me to put everything on the line. I'm asking you to say what needs to be said, and I'll make sure they hear it. She sighed. Then we go all in. Friday arrived fast. Employees filed into the sleek East Wing conference room under warm lighting and cold suspicion. Elijah stood near the back, quietly watching as Kennedy approached the podium in a crisp navy blazer. Valerie beamed from the front row. Let's give a big round of applause for Kennedy Harris, here to talk about the importance of diversity and inclusion at our company. Polite claps, blank stares. Then Kennedy took a breath and began. But what she said next wasn't what they had scripted for her. I was asked to speak about inclusion, she began, but I've decided instead to speak about silence. About what it costs. Valerie sat up straight. Logan shifted in his seat. Because silence, Kennedy continued, isn't neutral. It's complicity. And in this company, I've learned that staying quiet keeps you employed, but it also keeps you invisible. And I didn't come here to disappear. The room went still. Behind them, Elijah hit record on his concealed camera. It was only beginning. The air was different that Monday morning. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but like a current humming beneath the floorboards. Kennedy's speech had sent ripples across every corner of Stratton Reed. Most employees pretended nothing had happened, but behind closed doors, in break rooms and Slack channels, her words echoed louder than any memo. Elijah had watched the footage again and again over the weekend, her voice so controlled yet powerful. Her words, scalpel precise. The way she refused to flinch under pressure. It reminded him of why he started this mission in the first place. But it also reminded him how much was still hidden. By Tuesday, the backlash had begun. Valerie summoned Kennedy into her office first thing in the morning. Elijah happened to be buffing the floor just outside. "Let's cut to it," Valerie's voice snapped. "That little monologue you gave last week. Completely out of line." Kennedy didn't blink. "I was invited to speak about diversity. I did. You undermined company leadership. I told the truth. That's subjective." "No," Kennedy said calmly. "What you're doing right now, that's subjective." Elijah leaned his weight on the buffer, listening. "You're on thin ice," Valerie hissed. "You're on probation as of now. Any further insubordination, and we'll have no choice but to begin termination procedures." Kennedy stood slowly. "If I'm being punished for using my voice, then maybe this isn't the place I thought it was." When she stepped out of the office, her eyes flickered toward Elijah. No nod, no smile. Just acknowledgement. And it was enough. That night, Elijah met Charles in the back of an old parking garage downtown. Their conversations had become more frequent, more urgent. "They're moving fast," Elijah said, leaning against the steel beam. "Trying to shut her down." Charles opened his laptop and turned the screen toward him. "Which is why we accelerate." I dug deeper into Logan and Valerie. Turns out there's been a quiet exodus of black employees from this company over the past 18 months. No formal complaints, but the patterns are damning. "How many?" 17. Most within 6 months of joining. Elijah felt the heat rise in his chest. "And no one's investigated?" "Because no one's collected the data. Until now." They exchanged a look, silent understanding passing between them. "Then we hit them with it," Elijah said. "But not just numbers. We make it human." The next morning, Elijah quietly approached Ava again in the break room. "You ever hear of an analyst named Darren Brooks?" Her face fell. "Yeah." "Smart kid, quiet. He left last year. Told me he couldn't breathe in that place. Never came back." Elijah handed her a small card. He agreed to share his story, anonymously. "But we're looking for more." "Not just stories, evidence. Are you in?" She stared at the card. Then nodded slowly. "Tired of pretending I don't see it." By Wednesday, Elijah had gathered enough testimonies to paint a damning picture. Anonymous recordings, chats, email snippets, all showing a toxic, racially biased undercurrent that had seeped into every floor of the company. Now it was time to strike. He sent the footage of Kennedy's speech, combined with the anonymized data, to 3 major business journalists under an encrypted email account. No names, no titles. Just truth. The first article dropped that Thursday. Stratton Reed faces allegations of systemic racism amid employee protest. The second followed within hours. Then came the phone calls. Kennedy was called into HR the next morning, but this time she wasn't alone. A lawyer was waiting in the lobby. And Elijah, still wearing his janitor's uniform, was standing nearby with a flash drive in his pocket. A backup, just in case. Inside the HR office, Valerie tried to regain control. "This isn't how we handle grievances." "You mean in silence?" Kennedy asked. Valerie's voice rose. This is a private matter. You've now made it public. You've exposed confidential internal operations. Kennedy leaned forward. You threatened me. You used my race as a PR shield and then tried to bury me when I didn't play along. The HR rep looked visibly uncomfortable. Let's take a pause here. But the fire was already spreading. That afternoon, Elijah received an unexpected visitor while he was cleaning the third-floor lounge. Logan. You think I don't see what's happening? Logan said, voice low. I know someone's feeding this. It's not Kennedy. She's not smart enough to coordinate this. Elijah paused. Maybe you just underestimated her. Logan squinted. You got a smart mouth for a janitor. Elijah tilted his head. Maybe I'm more than just that. For the first time, Logan looked uncertain. Keep watching, Elijah said quietly. You're going to see exactly what happens when the people you step on decide to rise. Then he walked away, because the game had changed, and the truth wasn't hiding anymore. By Friday morning, the walls at Stratton Reed were starting to crack. The media firestorm had taken full shape. 2 major business news outlets were now running stories, and a local television station had even shown up outside the building, hoping to get a comment from someone, anyone. PR was in full damage control mode, but no one could outrun the truth anymore. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Conversations halted when someone new entered the room. Eye contact was avoided, and the racial divide that had always been whispered about was now visible as daylight. Kennedy wasn't in the office that morning. Rumor had it she was with her lawyer preparing a formal legal complaint. Valerie had shut herself in her office, refusing calls and answering no emails. Logan, on the other hand, walked the floors like a general about to lose a war. Arrogant, furious, and cornered. Elijah, still in his janitor's uniform, moved silently through the chaos, catching fragments of panic in every department. Do you think we'll get dragged into it? I never said anything racist, but I mean, should I be worried? What if they bring up that Christmas party? You remember the joke Stephen told? Meanwhile, Charles was feeding Elijah more information by the hour. Employee files, financial records. Even a private email thread between Valerie and Logan discussing media optics and using minority hires as shields. It was damning. By noon, an emergency all-staff meeting was called in the main auditorium. Elijah slipped in unnoticed and took a seat near the back, his janitor badge still clipped to his shirt. Most of the office was already there, whispering among themselves, the tension vibrating through the air like a wire pulled too tight. Logan strode to the podium like nothing was wrong. His tailored suit, silver tie, and smug smile looked out of place in a room full of fear. We are aware of the stories circulating in the press, he began smoothly. Let me be clear. Stratton Reed is a company built on diversity, inclusion, and excellence. Someone snorted from the second row. Logan hesitated but pressed on. We will not be swayed by anonymous attacks or manipulated narratives, and we certainly won't let disgruntled employees dictate the future of this company. The room stirred. Elijah saw shoulders tense, eyes shift. Logan was trying to regain power the only way he knew, by pretending none of this was real. I urge you all to remember who we are, and not to let the media circus cloud your judgment. Then he made his mistake. In fact, Logan said, scanning the crowd, we've begun internal reviews, and disciplinary action will be taken against any employees found violating company policies, including those who leak confidential information. That was it. Ava stood up. I'd like to know which policy says we can't speak out when we're harassed, she said, voice trembling but loud enough to cut through the silence. Logan stiffened. This isn't the time for... It's the perfect time, another voice chimed in. Darren Brooks. He had come back, standing near the exit doors, arms crossed. You remember me, Logan? You probably don't. I was the black analyst you said didn't fit the client image. I left without saying a word. But not anymore. Whispers turned into murmurs. Logan's mask began to slip. Is this a planned ambush? He snapped. No, Ava said, stepping forward. This is the truth catching up to you. Then the door at the back opened again, and Kennedy walked in. She was dressed in a crisp navy blue suit, her curls pulled back tightly, eyes sharp as glass. At her side was a woman in a black blazer with a Department of Labor badge clipped to her hip. The room gasped. Kennedy walked straight to the front, passing Logan without so much as a glance, and turned to face her colleagues. My name is Kennedy Moore. I'm an analyst, a black woman, and someone who almost lost her job for calling out the racism you all saw and said nothing about. But I'm not afraid anymore. And you don't have to be either. Silence gripped the room. Then Elijah stood up in the back. Slowly, he stepped forward, walked past the stunned rows of employees, past Logan, whose mouth had fallen open, and straight up to the podium. He removed his janitor's badge. My name is Elijah Bradford. I'm the CEO of Bradford Capital, the majority shareholder of this firm. And for the past 4 weeks I've been posing as a janitor here to understand what really happens when power and prejudice go unchecked. The room erupted. Logan stumbled back a step. Valerie, who had finally shown her face, froze mid-stride in the aisle. Cameras were pulled out. The truth had landed like a thunderclap. Elijah raised a hand to quiet the noise. What I saw during these weeks, how people like Kennedy were treated, how voices were silenced, and how racism was allowed to fester under the guise of professionalism, was unacceptable. Effective immediately, there will be a full investigation into every complaint. Every name, every action, and I promise you this, the culture of silence dies today. People stood, clapping. Some crying, some just stunned. But in that moment, for the first time in years, Stratton Reed didn't feel like a corporation. It felt like justice, finally waking up. Monday morning at Stratton Reed didn't feel like a Monday. It felt like the dawn after a storm. But it was far from over. The revelations from the town hall hadn't just made headlines. They'd sparked a federal labor investigation and sent ripples across the industry. Clients were calling. Partner firms were distancing themselves. And inside the office, no one quite knew where to look when they passed Elijah Bradford in the hallway. Not in janitor's gear, but a tailored navy suit and polished Oxfords. His presence alone was enough to make even the boldest whisper fade. Valerie had gone radio silent. Her office blinds were closed, her nameplate removed. No one said where she went. Logan, though technically still employed, had been placed on administrative leave, pending formal inquiry. His absence left a vacuum, but not a void of silence. The staff was talking, finally talking, not just about what had happened, but about what they wanted to happen next. Elijah had no intention of becoming a dictator. That wasn't the point of this. His goal wasn't to impose, but to empower. He gathered a small team of volunteers, people from every floor, every background, to serve on an internal ethics task force. Kennedy, Ava, Charles, even Darren came back to help. That afternoon, they held their first closed-door meeting in what used to be the executive boardroom. Elijah sat not at the head of the table, but among them, shirt sleeves rolled up, a notebook in front of him. We're not just cleaning house, he said, voice low but steady. We're rebuilding it. Brick by brick. But I want to start with what you all have been through. What's been silenced? Say it now. The room was quiet at first. Then Ava broke the silence. I used to keep a second pair of shoes under my desk, she said. I wasn't trying to be cute. It's because I got so anxious walking past HR that my feet would sweat through my heels. Charles looked down. I kept a folder of emails from Logan. All those microaggressions. But I never sent them anywhere. I thought no one would care. Darren shook his head. The day I left, I got home and stared at myself in the mirror for 10 minutes, wondering if I really wasn't good enough, or if I just didn't look the part. Kennedy sat still, her jaw tight. Every time I reported something, I got a warning added to my file. I went from being the highest performing analyst to being labeled disruptive. Not because of what I did, but because I wouldn't be quiet. Elijah closed his notebook. You're not alone. Not anymore. He pulled out a manila folder and laid it on the table. These are reports HR buried, logs they never expected me to find. Valerie and Logan weren't just hostile. They weaponized policy to suppress you. The air turned heavy. Charles reached out, flipping open the file. His hands trembled. There's one more thing, Elijah said, hesitating. There's a third player, someone who backed Valerie from behind the scenes. The room froze. Kennedy narrowed her eyes. Who? Elizabeth Merriweather, Elijah said. Senior legal counsel. She's the one who drafted the language used in disciplinary actions. She was involved in every decision, every silencing. Darren leaned back, stunned. But she's the one who always smiles in those diversity videos. That's the point, Elijah replied. Racism doesn't always wear a scowl. Sometimes it wears pearls. It was a punch in the gut, because Elizabeth had been viewed as an ally. She'd chaired the Women in Finance Committee. She'd mentored young associates, but underneath that was a sharp, calculated strategist who had protected the very people doing harm. Kennedy stood slowly. Then we can't just go after Logan and Valerie. We have to expose the system that let them thrive. Elijah nodded. Exactly. And we will, but we do it right. No leaks. No theatrics. We build the case and take it to the board ourselves. Charles frowned. The board backed Logan for years. What makes you think they'll listen now? Elijah's gaze turned steely. Because I'm not asking. I own 52% of Stratton Reed. And this time, they'll answer to me. The room sat in quiet awe, not because of his wealth, but because for the first time, someone with power wasn't using it to protect themselves, but to protect everyone else. That night, as the office emptied out and the city lights blinked on outside, Elijah stayed behind with Kennedy, finalizing the documents to present to the board. Kennedy looked over a file, then paused. Why did you do it? She asked. Why come here as a janitor? You could have hired an outside firm, or had someone else investigate. Elijah leaned back in his chair. Because when I first started out in this industry, I was just like you, young, hungry, smart, and constantly told to be quiet. And one day I realized I had climbed to the top of a mountain I didn't recognize. So I came back down, to remember why I climbed in the first place. She didn't say anything for a long moment, but when she looked up, her eyes weren't filled with admiration. They were filled with purpose. Let's burn the whole thing down, she whispered. No, Elijah said, smiling. Let's rebuild it right. The boardroom was packed, not the usual polite shuffle of suits and briefcases, but a charged, uneasy silence. Everyone knew this wasn't going to be a standard meeting. The moment Elijah Bradford walked through the double glass doors in a sharp charcoal suit, the entire room stiffened. Behind him were Kennedy, Ava, Charles, Darren, and a silent USB drive that weighed heavier than any of them expected. Seated at the far end of the table was Marjorie Dalton, chair of the board, with her signature blood-red blazer and unreadable expression. Next to her was Elizabeth Merriweather, her pearl necklace gleaming under the recessed lights. "Mr. Bradford," Marjorie greeted coolly. "You requested a closed executive session. Please proceed." Elijah remained standing. He took a deep breath, looked around at the executives who once sat comfortably in their high-back chairs, and then spoke. "Today isn't about policy updates or quarterly metrics. It's about integrity. It's about holding people accountable, not just for what they did, but for what we let them do." A faint cough echoed in the room. Someone shifted in their chair. He nodded toward Kennedy, who stepped forward and plugged the USB into the conference screen. The monitor flickered, then lit up with a video from the HR security feed. There, in full color and audio, was Logan Foster pushing past Elijah, still in janitor disguise, and muttering a racial slur under his breath, followed by Valerie sneering in the staff lounge, mocking Kennedy's hair while sipping from her branded coffee mug. But that wasn't the worst of it. The next clip rolled, audio from a recorded call between Elizabeth Merriweather and Valerie. "We've got too many diversity hires sniffing around," Elizabeth said flatly. "Keep them occupied." "Give them just enough rope!" Gasps erupted. One board member dropped his pen. Marjorie's face went pale. Elizabeth, however, stayed composed. She adjusted her glasses, then looked directly at Elijah. "Where did you get that recording?" "I authorized all system access during my internal audit," Elijah replied evenly. "Every file, every call, every red flag you swept under the rug." Elizabeth's calm cracked. "This is entrapment. You deceived the staff. This entire investigation is tainted." "No," Kennedy cut in sharply. "You did the deceiving. You helped craft a hostile culture and used your position to cover it up." Marjorie turned to Elizabeth. "Is this true?" "I was protecting this company," Elizabeth snapped. "We were hemorrhaging productivity. These accusations distract from performance." Ava stood up. "You mean people standing up for themselves? That's the distraction?" Charles added, "We're not just names on spreadsheets. We're the reason this company even functions." Elijah paced slowly. "It's time to choose between profit built on silence or progress built on equity. And since I still hold controlling shares, I'm making the first choice clear." He opened a leather folder and placed termination letters on the table. "One for Logan, one for Valerie, one for Elizabeth." Elizabeth rose from her chair, fury flashing. "You can't do this! I've been here for 15 years!" "Then you should have known better," Elijah said. Marjorie looked between them, then to the room. "The board will vote on permanent removal, effective immediately. The 3 named individuals are suspended pending final review." Elizabeth stared daggers as security entered the room. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "No," Elijah replied. "I regret letting it go on this long." As she was escorted out, the room remained still. Everyone seemed stunned, until Kennedy spoke up. "There's something else you all need to hear." She pulled out a printed employee petition, over 200 signatures. "This is a request for a formal review of company policies around workplace conduct, racial bias training, and staff inclusion. We're not just cleaning house, we're building something better." Marjorie nodded slowly. For the first time, there was no resistance. Later that evening, Elijah stood alone in his office, watching the sun drop behind the skyline. Kennedy knocked once, then stepped inside. "You did it," she said. "No," he replied quietly. "We did, but there's still more to fix." She stepped closer. "This place feels different now. People are walking taller." He looked over at her. "You ever think about leading it?" She blinked. What? You're sharp, respected, and you know what this place could be if we keep pushing. Kennedy hesitated. You'd step down? Not today, Elijah said. But soon. The future shouldn't wait for me to let go. She nodded, eyes glossy. Then let's finish what we started. The lobby felt different. It wasn't the fresh coat of paint or the redesigned reception desk that gave the place new energy. It was the quiet ripple of dignity, of voices no longer silenced, of footsteps walking with purpose. It had only been 2 weeks since the internal investigation exploded, but the change was real. Elijah Bradford stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of Bradford Co., sipping black coffee. His reflection stared back at him, no longer a janitor, but not entirely the same CEO who once sat in corner offices, untouched by dust or disregard. Behind him, Kennedy approached with a folder in her hands. "It's done," she said softly. Final review closed. All 3 were formally terminated. HR is implementing the new oversight panel, and your proposal for the Inclusion Council was unanimously approved. Elijah turned around, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "Good, but we're not done, are we?" "No," she replied. "Not by a long shot." A moment passed. "Are you still stepping back?" she asked, hesitant. Elijah looked at her and nodded. "Yes." "This company needs new blood with the fire to keep fighting, not someone who watched things rot and said nothing for too long." "You didn't just watch," Kennedy said. "You acted, when it counted." He appreciated that. But he knew the truth. Real leadership wasn't about titles. It was about timing, about listening when it was hardest, and speaking up when it was most dangerous. As the day wore on, Elijah walked through each floor of the company, no longer invisible. People smiled at him, some shook his hand, a few apologized, but he didn't linger on the apologies. He stopped by the janitorial supply closet. Opened it. The same mop, the same cot. The same smell of ammonia and polish. He stood there for a long second, then reached in and grabbed the faded blue janitor's shirt, folded it gently and tucked it under his arm. "Won't need this again," he whispered, half to himself. Just as he turned to leave, a voice called out, "Elijah!" It was Darren, running breathlessly down the hallway. "There's a group from the local university downstairs, black business students. They want to meet you. Say you're the reason they believe change is possible." Elijah chuckled. "Bring them up." An hour later, he stood in the conference room surrounded by 10 young, eager faces, each with questions, some with doubt, all with hope. "Why'd you do it?" one student asked. "Why go undercover when you could have just fired them?" Elijah looked at him squarely. "Because power means nothing if you don't understand how people are treated when they have none. I didn't want to clean house from the top. I wanted to see who would treat a stranger like dirt, who would stand up, and who would stay silent." He let that sink in. "What I found was disappointing. But what came next, that was inspiring." Kennedy stood by the doorway, watching him. She knew what was coming. Elijah nodded to the group, then to her. "This company is in new hands, the kind that doesn't care about suits, skin color, or connections. The kind that values action. Her name is Kennedy Harris. She's earned this more than anyone I know." Gasps. Applause. Kennedy stepped forward, her hands trembling, eyes shining. "I'll do everything I can," she said. "Not just for this place, but to make sure no one ever has to go undercover just to be respected." Later that evening, as the sun set over the city, Elijah left the building with nothing but a folded shirt under his arm and peace in his chest. He didn't need to run a company anymore. He just needed to know that it was worth building in the first place. Because this story wasn't about a black CEO tricking his staff. It was about exposing who people really were when they thought no one was watching. It was about making sure the next generation doesn't just inherit a business, but a better way to do business. If this story moved you, if you believe that power should be used to lift people up, not keep them down, share it, like it, subscribe. We've got more voices to uncover, and more stories that need to be told.